So, so I think as Mr. Shankar Hallar has said about driving the technology. Now, you see, there are, it depends upon how you view the technology and from which angle we are viewing. In the last decade or so, let me just give you a technologist perspective. Of course, in the previous talk, you saw a consumer or a human behavior perspective. But since I am more a technologist, I'll just give you some technologist perspective. In the last decade or so, we are witnessing several paradigm shifts in the technology development. And these paradigm shifts are really driving our economy into a all-pervasive, digitally connected economy. And that means, not only you are able to talk to anyone on the go, anywhere in the world, just like in the cellular mobile communications. And as also in the previous talk was mentioned about companies such as Google, which were really born in the era of internet. Going forwards, some fundamental paradigm shifts are going to take place. And that are not just, human beings interacting with other human beings through cell phones or interacting with the machines. But more paradigm shifts are coming up from machines interacting with machines. And I think that is a significant shift that is going to take place. In fact, in the 5G communications or the future communications, what we are going to call as large machine type communications, where everything in the world will be digitally connected and that can speak to each other. It is not just therefore human beings interacting with human beings, but human beings interacting with machines and machines interacting with machines. And with the advent of these machines digitally connected, that means these are like robotics or and driven by a human-like behavior in the form of learning. I think a whole paradigm shift in the way in which we live in the world is going to change. It is not just how we are going to work, but we live in the world is going to change. And it is in this context, I believe it is going to have a profound impact on the economy in the sense of jobs which will be needed, because many of the jobs, when they get sort of automatically done by the machines, then you certainly need a set of skill sets either to drive those machines or to develop the machines or developing the use cases for these machines. The other thing that is going to happen like in the next 10-20 years will be, because of this all-pervasive digitally connected world, a tremendous impact on several verticals, which is be it the agriculture or the healthcare sector or the transportation sector, because we are no longer going to have an IT world which is limited to communications or information technology or internet or banking or something. As a matter of fact, we are going to have the digital connectivity in agriculture, it is in healthcare sectors, it is in transportation sectors. And this is really going to drive the requirements of new set of skill sets which are needed even for agriculturists or healthcare professionals or the doctors or including the people who are working in the transportation sectors. And I think, I believe that this is really going to be, at least in the next decade or so, the dawn of a sort of a new age economy driven by sort of new age technologies. As was said by the moderator, that India has been traditionally a consumer of the technology, and for example, for even in the case of the proliferation of cellular mobile communications, we were primarily today still continue to be the consumers instead of developers of the technology. But what is interesting that is going to happen is that since in the all digitally connected world which is going to touch every domain like the agriculture, health sector, and so on, there is a significant opportunity for us to drive the technology. And in the previous talk, it was mentioned that technology driving can be done by consumer or human behavior. I'm saying that here the technology driving can be done even from developing new technologies in order to cater to specific domain sectors and preparing those domain experts for the new technologies. So in fact, you will see that you will need special skill sets even for the domain experts, be it an agriculturalist or be it an healthcare sector and so on. Just to give you an example, of course, it was briefly mentioned that today, for example, the patients go informed to the doctor by doing the Googling search. But I will give you a different perspective of the doctors. For example, today, you need a skilled doctor to evaluate your, an X-ray or a CT scan or an MRI scan to really determine that, what kind of these reports are. With the advent of machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms and hundreds of and thousands and lakhs of these image data sets available, you won't no longer need a trained radiologist to really do the radio diagnosis of the film. That is actually imminently possible in the next 5 years or so. Then what is the role in that case of a healthcare professional begins? The role of the healthcare professional really begins having a skill set which will be really required to train the machines really which is going to do these large scale predictions that are going to do. So this means there is a shift that is taking place in the skill sets that are required even for the domain experts in order to live and work in an all pervasive digitally connected world. And since the technology evolution, and as was rightly said, that we cannot predict what is a new age technology, and since the technology evolutions are taking rapidly, there will always remain a gap between a formal education that you receive in your schools or colleges, or how you then later on work in your either profession or even in an everyday life. And therefore, as we say, that skill sets will be required not only to deploy, develop and work in your professions, but skill sets may be required even for having living your common everyday life. So skill sets may be needed even to use a device, for example. It is not just to develop a device or to develop an application, but skill sets will be needed even to use such devices. And I think it is in this context that we are seeing today the profound impact of these technologies in terms of creating jobs which are not only in terms of driving the technology development but also in terms of deploying and then later on using the technology for improving the quality of life. And it is in this context I would see that the dimensions of the technology development and the skilling is going to change it in the next decade or so.